Ante la constante evolución, es esencial reaccionar a tiempo. No te limites a estar a la última. Ve un paso por delante con la plataforma de pagos unificada de Adyen. Adyen, negocios sin límites.
There's a future where you're in charge, where you look good and feel good and get what you want, no strings attached, where you cultivate interests, not interest, and you're free to go after the good stuff. Welcome to the future.
Buenas tardes a todos, buenos días para los que conectáis desde Latinoamérica. Antes de nada, mil disculpas por este pequeño retraso que hemos tenido. Bienvenidos al segundo día de Barcelona Fashion Summit 2021. Para los que estuvisteis ayer, pues muchísimas gracias por volver a conectar hoy. Como os dijimos ayer, somos más de 2.500 profesionales de la industria de la moda inscritos a esta jornada. Y para los que conectáis por primera vez, pues nada, esperamos que os guste el contenido, que os enganche y que os quedéis toda la tarde con nosotros. Si ayer hablamos de macroeconomía, de e-commerce, de una empresa familiar como Picolinos o de un gigante como Levi's, hoy abordaremos aspectos como la sostenibilidad, también veremos cómo un gran gigante de la industria está atravesando esta crisis y afronta el futuro y, por supuesto, también hablaremos del consumidor tras el COVID-19. Paso la palabra a mi compañera Inés, que os presentará al primer ponente y empezamos ya el segundo día de Barcelona Fashion Summit. Inés.
Muchas gracias, Pilar. Buenas tardes a todos. Os presento. La primera ponencia del día correrá a cargo de Francois Souchet, responsable de la iniciativa Make Fashion Circular en el MacArthur Foundation. Se unió a la entidad en 2016 para trabajar con sus socios globales, incluidos Google y H&M, y para ayudar a impulsar la innovación en la economía circular. En 2018, tras el lanzamiento del informe A New Textiles Economy, Redesigning Fashion's Future, Souchet pasó a liderar Make Fashion Circular, programa que resalta acciones disruptivas dentro de la industria. Bonjour François, bienvenue, welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello everyone.
Hello. Thank you for being here with us. Go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for coming.
To be with you today. Great. So let's get started. So if we want to think about why it is important to transition towards a circular economy, it's important to understand what are the current issues that we are facing and the way in which the economy works today. Today, we see the economy as very much linear. We take stuff on, and we transform it into products that we use less and less before discarding them into landfill or to be incinerated, thus losing a lot of value through the process. So basically, today, if we want to make new products, new materials, we are recycling at the end of the life of a product, and waste is really high across the economy. And that linear system is putting a lot of pressure on the environment, on natural resources, but is also resulting in tremendous losses of value for the economy. And so we believe at the foundation that it is time to move towards a new system, a system that is about regeneration and restoration rather than extraction. And that system is a circular economy. A circular economy is basically a system solution framework that can tackle global challenges that we are facing, like climate change, like biodiversity loss, like waste. And the way in which we define a circular economy at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is with 3 principles that are all driven by design. The first principle is to eliminate waste and pollution. It basically means from the outset, expanding the design brief to encompass the way in which the product will be made, how it will be used, and what it becomes at the end of it. For fashion, the SAC estimated that 80% of the impact of the product is defined at the design stage. The second principle is to keep products and materials in use, and that is where the economic opportunity of a circular economy lies. If we find strategies that help us generate more value from the products that are already being created, then we can truly unlock the potential of a circular economy. And that means adopting new business models like rental, resale, product service, etc., to find more value in what's already there. And the last principle of a circular economy is to regenerate natural systems. And it basically means ensuring that through human activity, we can improve the quality of our ecosystems over time. If we take agriculture as an example, it means adopting agricultural practices that not only maintain the quality, but actually improves it over time, restores the quality of the soil that we rely on to grow our food. To give you a comparison with today, the way in which monoculture is actually degrading the soil means that according to 50 to 60 years of remaining with the topsoil we have if we don't change our practices. So really important to act on this principle. Now, a huge part of the work of fashion is to understand, apply to the fashion industry and what they can mean in terms of transformation for fashion. To start with, we need to look at what's the current status quo with the fashion industry and what are the issues. And this diagram shows how 97% of materials are from the 70% will end up directly in a landfill or incineration after. Over the past 15 years, the global production of clothing has been multiplied by 2, while the average number of times clothing is being worn has decreased by close to 40%. So massive acceleration in production, massive decrease in utilization, a lot of materials being used, tons of waste, pollution generated by the industry. How do we change that? But the challenges that the industry faces are not only on the materials and environmental side. There are also some significant macro trends that are really affecting how people connect and use fashion. And for example, the of customers. People are able to question more, to learn a lot more through access to digital media, to just the internet and Google, basically. And that requires an increased transparency from companies to be able to answer the questions that are raised. People are also living active lives. And those multi-active lives actually blend the boundaries between work, activity, social time, in normal pre-COVID times, but that will return. And actually, basically, that means people are trying to maximize the That's a trend that we see more and more. And for example, in the food industry, the fastest growing category is for semi-scratch food. Not just the raw ingredients. In between that, make sure that you can cook your own food, but not starting from scratch, so it's much more time efficient. The third macro trend that we see is around conscious aspiration. And that means more and more people are aware about the impact that humans are having on the planet and are aspiring to be actors of positive change. Basically, 37% of the population today can be categorized as aspirational consumers. They love shopping, they love the thrill that it brings, but they also have a desire for responsible consumption and trust brands that they like to do the right thing and act on those topics. Fourth trend is around customization. That's the culture of me. It's more and more about self-expression, about having services that are tailored to your needs and to your desires. And so basically more and more people expect personalization, especially when it comes to digital services. Fifth trend is on simplification of the decision-making process. We are all bombarded by information about new products, new services, marketing claims. It's overwhelming, it's overstimulating. And so there's a desire to have brands and services that you trust who can edit choices for you and help you the some choices. And finally, it's also about the transformation between a product-driven economy towards an experience economy, and people are increasingly redirecting their disposable income from stuff to experiences. So those are some impacting how people are relating and accessing fashion, and the combination of material and environmental pressure and customer changes provides a really nice opportunity for the industry to reinvent itself for the 21st century in a way that tackles all those elements together. And to do that, we've worked with the companies we interact with to create a vision of a circular economy for fashion that can help better understand what a circular economy could look like. And there are basically three areas where companies and the industry need to act to move towards a circular economy for fashion. The first one is to increase the use of clothing. The second one is to make clothing made again. And the third one is to make clothing from safe and recycled or renewable inputs. So we'll dive into each of those through examples to help understand a little bit what they can mean. So the first one is use more. The main opportunity of a circular economy from both an economic and environmental perspective comes increasing utilization of products. And it's also the most direct way of reducing the impact of the industry. If you increase use, reduce production, that results in a much, much lower footprint. And there's a lot of, you can, for example, look at how increase the number of time people use their own products. That means making sure that they're fresh, they can say, if something were to wear them out, they can be easily repaired. And that's what the Restory is doing. They're offering a repair service for shoes and handbags. And they've actually partnered with companies like Selfridges and Harvey Nichols, which are two large department stores in the UK and globally, to offer those services so people can keep their products for longer. You can also look at how can you have multiple users for a product, either by having peer-to-peer rental or resale or sharing services, making sure that actually if someone doesn't use it or doesn't want to use it anymore, someone else can. There's a third opportunity around actually making sure that if a product is no longer really desirable in itself, it can be remade into a new desirable product. So by reusing the fabric, by adding embellishments, by transforming it slightly, that product can be transformed into something that again has value and that people want to wear. And the fourth opportunity is to move beyond products. And we see, for example, an acceleration in decreased utilization through social media. That is basically in order to feed content on those platforms. People are actually only using a product once and not using it afterwards. And that's where concepts like DressX have actually value, because by providing a digital alternative to a physical clothes, they can help people have fresh content for social media use while preventing the need to manufacture those products. And those companies actually sell out a lot of the collections they create and are working really well. So a good example of actually thinking beyond the product into how can you service the need from people without needing to put even more product on the market. The second area is making products so they can be made again. That means from the how product be disassembled and how its components can be recycled once that product can no longer be used. And there are a few examples out there. The first one is to look at how can you create something that's monomaterial so you can easily take it back, shred it, or dissolve it and make it into a new product. 4 Days has been doing, for example, basics made 100% organic cotton. They offer a buyback. So if you buy a product from 4 Days and you can't wear it anymore because it's worn out or because you don't like it, you can send it back and they shred it and they recycle it. Unspun has taken a slightly different approach. So what they did is actually look at how can their pair of jeans be the right fit for the user? How can they be easily disassembled and recycled? So how can it be the right technology that looks at exactly your body shape so they can make the product exactly to your size? We know that fit is a massive component in actually ensuring that products are worn for a long time. By providing the right fit, they increase the likelihood of that product being worn for a long time. The second aspect is the disassembly. And so there's a text that makes a dissolvable thread, basically making sure that when the jeans are no longer used, those threads can easily be removed. I think through microwave, they dissolve, and the different parts of the jean now are free and can be either reused or recycled. They've also looked at the fabric components and making sure that the fabric itself is recyclable, looking at what are the different criteria to help recyclers actually take it and put it through their process, because there are limitations in terms of recyclers can and can. Also partnered with a company called Circular, called Ion, providing a digital identity to the product so it can be tracked. Information can be embedded in that product so it can be easily traced and understood. And now when it comes to safe and recycled or renewable inputs, there are a few things that are happening that are quite interesting. The first one is a partnership with H&M and a company called RENEWABLE that is a chemical recycler of cotton. So they basically dissolve cotton to make a viscose from it. And what they've done is they've created a range of products, including this dress, that's made 50% of recycled content from the technology from RENEWABLE and 50% of viscose coming from certified forest. And the interesting part about the recycled content is that it's coming from jeans created by companies Bank and Vogue in Canada. So it's a great way also to illustrate how partnerships can enable circular economy to happen in real life and at scale. And another type of partnership that's quite interesting is the one between Timberland and the Savory Institute to create a regenerative supply chain for leather. basically looking at how can cattle be raised in a way that animals were grazing, making sure we can move around the fields in a way that's quite natural, so that the grass has more time to grow again, the soil is less compacted, can absorb more carbon, can regenerate faster. And a final example coming from a project that we did with Make Fashion Circular is looking at how those three components can interact. How can we look at the durability, the recyclability, and the materials health at the same time? And that's what we did with the jeans redesign. We worked to create guidelines to create jeans for a circular economy. Those guidelines encompass the durability, the material sourcing, making sure that it's from organic cotton, making sure that a lot of chemicals and finishing processes are saved, that ensure that the technologies that effectively change them into new ones. And today we've got around 70 companies that have pledged volumes to the jeans redesign to be put on the market before May this year. And it's quite exciting. A lot of those companies actually have put their jeans on the market. You can see on Spun that we just mentioned, H&M have, and a few others. So it's all on our website if you wish to know when those jeans are on the market. So, having thoughts, that is increasing relevant and a very relevant opportunity as we look at rebuilding the industry post-COVID. It presents an opportunity to tackle both a new economic opportunity, a reduced environmental impact from the industry, and a reconnection with evolving customers. And a circular economy for fashion is made out of three components. The first one is business models that ensure clothing can be used more. The second one is design and product creation practices that ensure clothing is made to be made again, with infrastructure that make sure that this happens in practice. And the third component is materials that are safe, both for the workers and for the environment, and recycled or renewable. And that's it.
Merci beaucoup, François. Thank you again. Let's move on to the Q&A section now. Pasamos al turno de preguntas de la mano del panel de expertos. Hoy contamos con 3 personas a quienes damos la bienvenida. Son Luis Lara, de Retalent, Martín Poppe, de Sedna, y Bruno Rodríguez, de Deloitte. Bienvenidos.
Muchas gracias.
¿Os animáis con alguna pregunta? Luis, por ejemplo.
Okay. Thank you, Francois, for such an inspiring presentation. I have one question. Do you think that the mass market models, the fast fashion and the quick reaction fashion models are compatible with the achievement of being fully sustainable from a circular model point of view, as you have explained? Do you think that for this business model, it makes sense considering the volumes and the costs and the prices and also the cost of logistics? Do you envision that this big part of the industry with this volume models will transition to a fully sustainable circular model? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And I think it's definitely something that needs to be worked on. There are a few opportunities that exist already, making products using better materials, using better supply chain practices so that you can have less impact, making sure that they are being created, like after use. When we look at the transition to a circular economy, we don't necessarily believe that every single company will have an answer for all the 3 areas of the transformation. What we see is actually companies need to work on some of the key elements that they have control upon. And for example, if you look at the, let's say, higher volumes company, not all of them are investing in resale market, for example. However, you've got Vinted or Depop or companies like that growing on the side and offering those products secondhand to customers who want to buy them, thus providing a sort of balance and ensuring that those can be used more. So for the higher volume people, what is really important is to think about how they fit within that new system and how can they create their products so they can be made again when they're not used anymore, and making sure that the way in which they are made has minimum environmental impact. So I guess that's definitely a big question about that looks like for them all to figure it out. But it's not saying that they should do everything themselves.
Martín, ¿alguna pregunta?
Yes, thanks very much. First of all, Francois, thank you very much for the interesting presentation. What we see as an executive search firm a lot of times in international companies, that it's not very clear how to measure sustainability and how to measure durability in the different sectors. And that's because there's often a lack of standardization. How do you look at that?
That is a very good question. So the lack of measurement is definitely that we see more and more companies working, and actually at the foundation we've developed a tool, Circulytics, that really aims to help companies measure their progress towards the circular economy. So we've used the different principles of circular economy to establish targets on that. And the durability question is definitely one that is the hardest. We're actually working on it at the moment. I know that at the conversations around the sustainable product framework, around how do you measure the durability. The way in which we've approached it so far is to look at durability as two components. The first one being the emotional durability, and the second one being the physical durability. Both equally important, because you can make a product that lasts as long as possible. If people don't want to wear it, it's a wasted opportunity. So we need to control for both factors. Now for the physical durability, when we did our work on jeans, the way in which we approached it is by looking at how many standard washes that pair of jeans could go through while still passing the test that companies are imposing on their products when they're new. So saying basically after 30 washes, your product can't have lost any physical strength compared to a new product. So that's the way in which we've approached it. There are probably a lot of different ways to approach it, but it's true that standardization there, when you have such a variety of products and uses, is a challenge.
Thank you, Francois. One last question, Bruno?
Sure. Once again, Francois, thank you for your thought-provoking speech. Let me go back to measure. No? Let's speak measure again. And I suggest, let me compare this industry or this textile sector with another one. For instance, the packaging industry. This industry has made and is still making a huge effort on trying to close the loop. So on the packaging industry, main brands have established, let's say, a circular economy goals and commitments to increase the use of recycling material on their packaging. I think that's a key objective. No? Those goals are monitored at the Global Commitment Report. So at this regard, are you, by this I mean Ellen MacArthur, working with the main textile retailers in setting up like a sector commitment, no, to let us measure how they improving step by step?
Yes, and I definitely agree that there's a need for more homogeneity in how companies are setting targets and reporting against it. Because today what we see is there's a huge variability in the definitions that are being used and in the way in which targets are being set, which makes comparison quite difficult. And definitely having a way to report progress that's homogeneous and transparent is important. I know that Textile Exchange is conducting their materiality report every year, looking at preferred fibers across the industry and how much they're being used. But yeah, there's not, I agree, there's not really a transparent mechanism like the global commitment that exists in fashion today.
Thank you, Francois. We have some questions from the audience as well. Pasamos a algunas preguntas del público. They ask, close the loop, new raw materials or secondhand? Choose just one as the most important issue for a fashion company.
Choosing just one is difficult because all three are important. I'd say if we look at what is the main way in moving towards the circular economy, I'd say reuse is the main lever, if I were to choose one.
Okay. One more question. ¿Quién lo tiene más fácil para ser sostenible, una startup o una gran compañía? For who is it easier to be sustainable, a startup or a big company?
That's a question. And I think the conversation we just had highlights it, right? If you're a large business that's already established, you've got livelihood shareholders to respect in your transition. So it's not forward. However, you've got massive amounts of resources and knowledge to dedicate to the problem. So you can think about it faster. If you're a smaller company, you don't have an amount of resources. However, you don't have a legacy. So you can start from the outset to be a little bit more aligned. So I'd say start challenging, but in very different ways. But I think when you don't have the legacy, you definitely have an advantage. Wow.
Thank you. Una segunda ronda de preguntas del panel de expertos. Luis, ¿te animas?
Yes, one further question. As you know, fashion is one of the most globalized industries. However, I'm sure that when you deliver your message to so many countries, you find that the pace of change and the rhythm of change is different. But nevertheless, the aim of the industry is to be sustainable. What do you think will happen with brands and countries that lag behind in the sustainability objectives?
That is a very, very good question. I think one of the things that we see is actually the push from customers, because culture is becoming more and more, and access to information, access to trends is becoming a lot more globalized. And so customers, even in countries that are not leading on the topic, still have access to all this wealth of information about the impact of the industry, about the positive solution that exists, and can include pressure on the local brands to take action. So I think it's basically that mix of influences. There's also another influence is interesting is the access and retention of talent, and what we see more in developed economies, but starting to permeate actually, is this idea of if you want to access and retain talent, you need to offer more than a competitive package. You need to offer purpose. And actually, as more and more companies are looking at being purposeful, that increases the pressure for others to do so, beyond regulations and beyond other type of pressure, because you want to have the best people working with you.
Thank you. Martin, a second question.
Yeah, Francois, the COVID-19 and the influence of COVID on sustainability. A lot of people say that's a positive effect because the people are more conscious. People are thinking more at maybe the future, about the future. At the other hand, we see, and we will see in the future, that because of the COVID, the economy will suffer, or is suffering. We see it already, especially in retail fashion. And there are also a very big pressure is there at this moment to the purchasing power of people. So if there is less purchasing power, how is it possible for fashion retailers to have a good financial model to sell their products in this downsizing economy at this moment?
That is a very, very good question. I think there are a few elements. The first one is what we've seen is the most resilient market, and all the brands that are active in the resale market had very strong financial performance compared to the rest of the market throughout the pandemic. And resale is actually a very good example of being able to better at a lower price point. And so that can definitely be a market to watch in the next few years, because it enables to solve slightly the question you have, which is how can you provide level quality alternatives, and in a way that is more sustainable, because those products would go through more life cycles.
Thank you.
One thing that surprised us, quickly, one thing that surprised us is actually when we entered the crisis, we didn't really know how brands and people would react, and whether those topics of sustainability and circular economy would stay high on the agenda or would drop for more pressing needs. And actually, in most of the companies we work with, the departments that have stayed strong or even grew over the crisis were the sustainability departments, because most brands now know that this is critical to their future.
Thank you. Bruno, una última pregunta.
What do you think on the European regulation in this fashion sector? Because my concern is that it is sufficiently flexible to prevent companies from closing down, because it's a very demanding regulation. But at the same time, bearing in mind that have to be strict, let's say, enough to actually make a difference. So just for instance, that from current year onwards, it is forbidden, at least in Spain, and other European countries, to incinerate textile residue. But there are coming many additional measures harder and not easy to be implemented in this sector. No? How is your view on that?
Sorry, my voice broke a little bit. Can you repeat your question? I didn't get it completely.
Yeah, so basically, what's your opinion? What do you think on the upcoming regulation in Europe? It's very hard regulation, and for many companies, it's been hard to implement those measures. And there is let's say, my main concern is that if this regulation is flexible enough to prevent some companies from closing down, but at the same time, is restricted enough also to actually make a difference in the sector.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very good question. The way we've looked at regulation at the foundation is that they set the rule of the game. So it's got a massive role to play in the transformation. I was just having a conversation before this panel, how renewable energy and how actually played a critical role in leveling the playing field and making renewable energy more affordable. One thing that we see in regulation is actually what is important is to give a sense of where the regulation is going in the future and to increase the requirements progressively. And you've seen it with the car industry, setting emission standards that are raised over time with some legality about all the targets that companies should meet over time, help make sure no company would close down in the midterm because they were a bit far behind, while giving them enough time to catch up so that you could move forward. And that could be an opportunity to actually say, well, within the next few years, these are the different things that are going to change, and this is how demands are going to increase, so that you give time for people to catch up, but not too much so nothing happens.
Thank you very much, François. Merci beaucoup for your presentation. Y gracias a los tres, Luis, Martín, Bruno, por vuestras preguntas. Nos vemos en la siguiente sesión.
Ante la constante evolución, es esencial reaccionar a tiempo. No te limites a estar a la última. Ve un paso por delante con la plataforma de pagos unificada de Adyen. Adyen, negocios sin límites.
There's a future where you're in charge, where you look good and feel good and get what you want, no strings attached, where you cultivate interests, not interest, and you're free to go after the good stuff. Welcome to the future.